Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. We are live. We have got the most phenomenal guest. Those of you watching, you've probably already seen him. I'm joined by the fantastic Pat Fitzmaurice, probably the greatest ranker out there. He is the managing editor at FantasyPros. Pat, how are you doing?
Oh, doing well, Rich. Thank you. I do not think I'm the greatest ranker. Hopefully, I'm an adequate ranker. I would settle for that. But thank you so much for having me.
Far better than I could ever dream of. I think I did the Fantasy Pros contest. I think I did it 3 years, and then I was just like, I'm terrible at this. And I'll stick to Dynasty and move forward.
Nice,
but For those of you joining us live, we're gonna do a mailbag show. So this show is whatever you want to make it. If you are watching live, jump in the comments, leave us a comment, and we'll answer your question live. But we have got a few that have been submitted ahead of time by some of our YouTube members. If you're not a YouTube member, you can go ahead and sign up now. But Pat, we'll dive straight in if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's get to it.
Beautiful. So nice, easy one to start with. Crispy, one of our members, he just wants to know what's your favorite league setup for a Dynasty startup, Pat?
Well, this is going to be kind of a boring answer, but I definitely prefer Superflex. I just think it's after the first year when you're only doing rookie drafts. I mean, I think Superflex just makes the rookie draft so much more interesting than one quarterback league. So Superflex is kind of mandatory for me. Really don't like kickers or defenses. And I guess I generally like to have leagues with at least 28 roster spots and 10 or 11 starting lineup spots. Just make sure it's big enough so it's not, a glorified keeper league masquerading as a dynasty league. That's about it. As far as I know there are a lot of leagues with frills in the scoring system, and I'm pretty straightforward. I do play in one league I quite enjoy that's like a relegation promotion league, like the like the EPL. So I enjoy that a lot. But you obviously need quite a few people to be able to pull something like that off. But for the most part, I generally keep it basic. But if someone else is the commissioner and wants to do a lot of fancy things and have a lot of bells and whistles, as long as they're the ones overseeing it all, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I say 12 team Superflex. I like a little tight end premium. I normally say 30 man rosters with sort of, as you said, 10 or 11 stars. I think that's sort of the sweet spot. I'm in a couple of those mad leagues, Ryan McDowell's kitchen sink leagues and things like that. And I'm glad I don't commission those because they're far too complex. But I enjoy playing in them. But as like a one-off, I wouldn't want that to be the bulk of the leagues I'm having to play because it's too much thought to try and work out what I'm doing every off season in each one of those.
Yeah, the promotion relegation leagues. So those are I guess they're called copycat leagues where it's multiple. There are 4 different Mike Evans in the league or 4 of each player or whatever. Since there are 4 divisions, that always gets a little interesting in the rookie drafts when you're like waiting for a certain player to fall to you and like, oh, okay, 2 of this guy have gone already. Are there going to be 2 more? Can it last 2 more till my pick? So those are interesting leagues for sure.
Yeah, we've got a version over here called the BFFL, which is, I think it's a 9-tiered kind of, it's sort of quasi dynasty. It's more keeper, I'd say. And that's 16 team, 1 QB IDP league. And it's absolutely bonkers because I said there's 9 different divisions. You can 2 up, 2 down in each.
Wow.
Take my hat off to Simo, who's the man that runs it, because it's an awful lot of work for him, but it's good fun. As much as I can't stand IDP because I'm absolutely terrible at it, to be honest.
Same.
So, question from Tom. Simply, how do you go about preparing for a startup, Pat? What's your kind of go-to, I guess, tips?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't do that much prep work in the run up to a startup draft simply because it's part of my job to keep updated dynasty rankings year round and do a weekly dynasty podcast. So Not that I'm neglecting to prepare necessarily. It's just that, the preparation is sort of year round because of the job. But for Tom or anyone else who might not, eat, sleep, and breathe Dynasty 365 days a year, search for articles on startup draft strategy on FantasyPros. I know we've done a bunch of them, and familiarize yourself with Dynasty ADP, either on our sites or there are other sites that track it. And most important, we have this thing called the Draft Wizard that is phenomenal, very aptly named because this thing is a magical tool. The Draft Wizard lets you do mock Dynasty startups, and there are all sorts of ways you can tweak it so that the settings closely mirror the settings for your league. So
yeah, it's absolutely, it's a phenomenal tool. I've certainly played with it a few times. It is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, our developers are really good, and they've come up with something pretty terrific there.
Yeah, I think
there's Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Tom's agreed. The one thing I'd say that I also do, Pat, which I think is probably a little bit underrated in terms of what people do, is research your league mates. Whether it be if you're in other leagues with them, go and look at the rosters. Are there particular players that they're rostering in every league? Go and have a look at them on Twitter. Are they constantly tweeting about certain players? Maybe slightly sneaky, but if you're drafting on Sleeper, you go on to a lot of these tools. Dynasty Planet have got one. You can enter their Sleeper ID and pull up their rostership for all their leagues.
Wow.
Again, if there's a theme there of certain players, you can start to get a feel and understand how people are certainly starting to attack leagues and attack startups. And I think that any little bit of information that you can add to the arsenal as such is really useful. So it doesn't take a lot of time and it can be really helpful. So yeah, definitely go and research those league mates.
Yeah, even knowing which teams they are supporters of.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, speaking of Tom, obviously, Tom rosters every single Ravens player known to man. So it makes life easy in a startup because he's going to reach on them. Another YouTube member's come in with a question here, Pat. So we've got Kiwi Matt. How do you decide when to sell an aging veteran? Now, this question he was referencing purely in regards to a player like Davante Adams. But I mean, we could list a whole host of players that are approaching that age cliff.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely case by case, and but Davante Adams is kind of an interesting one because I do think maybe it's getting close to time to sell on him. He's over that magic 30 number, and not going to have quite the same quarterback situation he's had his first 8 years with a future walk-in Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers, and then goes to his former college teammate at Fresno State, Derek Carr. So he's always had like a very comfortable quarterback situation. Probably isn't going to have that this year with Jimmy Garoppolo, assuming his foot is okay after offseason surgery that he's reportedly been slow to recover from. And it just seems like Davante's not real happy with the direction of the Raiders offense. So I don't know. It just seems like there could be a full-blown mutiny in Las Vegas this year.
Like he could get traded.
Yeah, exactly. But I would say it's when I start to see signs of it, either something in a player's statistical profile or with my own eyes, where it just looks like they're not as, fast or elusive as they used to be, yet there is still a market demand for the player. Right. I think that's the ideal time to get out. Kind of the best case scenario for selling an aging veteran. But sometimes I don't mind just riding into the sunset with a veteran, depending on the situation. If I have a contending team and the veteran player is still useful, even if I know there's a little bit of slippage there, I'm okay. Just if I can continue to get something of value from them and knowing eventually, they're just going to collapse on me and I'll have to release them, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I think I've described this a few times as this. I think there's 4 windows of kind of dynasty value in terms of how players get to those windows. Differentiates massively depending on the player and how good they are. But there's should we call it the early phase where their perhaps value is outstripping their production. So, rookies that are valued as top 12 assets at the position, but perhaps not quite producing, someone like a Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson, we're talking potentially top 5 at the position in a dynasty startup. But last year were sort of fringe wide receiver 2s in terms of what they produced. Then there's that second window of elite value, elite production, and elite age still. The third window of the value starts to decline because they're kind of starting to approach towards those age cliffs, and people are starting to get concerned. So their value drops significantly, but they're still elite producers. And then there's the final phase where their value is out there and their production starts to decline. And I think for me, if I'm going to sell, I need to sell at that peak value of just before they're approaching that third window. If I don't sell at that point, then I'm just saying I'm probably holding this player for the rest of their career, because I think that, someone like Aaron Jones or someone like that, who was a sell for everybody last year, but actually you were probably only getting maybe a second round pick, maybe 2 seconds. And what you're getting back for those 2 seconds is probably never going to weigh up to the production that Aaron Jones is going to put forward. So for me, I'm kind of like, once I hit that window, if I've not sold before the value starts to decrease, I kind of hold on. I'm just like, yeah, I'm never probably going to get any resale value, but I'm holding for the production.
Yeah. And some of the cases are really fascinating. I mean, Travis Kelce, obviously, who's now well into his 30s, but still producing, production befitting one of the greatest tight ends of all time. Yeah. And eventually it's going to crumble, but there are no signs of it.
No,
He's
absolutely.
Been incredibly durable. He looks fantastic. The statistical profile, no blemishes, really. And even Tom Brady, who was he was past the point where other great quarterbacks just completely went over the age cliff, like Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, and Brady was still doing well. And what can you say about a guy who's 44 or 45, leading the league in pass attempts? Yeah. I mean, still had immense value pretty much till the time he finally decided to call it quits. So it is a dilemma, and it's just tricky because these things just work so differently, and we don't, we can read articles, and I know people have done a lot of research on where the age curve is, but obviously there's all sorts of variation depending on the individual.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect answer is that there is no exact answer, because if there was, every wide receiver once they hit 30 becomes useless, right, then everybody would try and sell a wide receiver at age 29. At which point everybody would then go, oh, you're trying to sell him here, so I'm going to sell him a little bit earlier. And then everyone would start selling at 28. And it's just a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, isn't it?
Exactly.
So we've got a question in the chat here. So have Dak in my Dynasty League, but with their OC gone, a more running-orientated offense, I fear he'll fall out the top 15 QBs. Do you agree?
Interesting. I do worry a little bit about a McCarthy, Schottenheimer directed offense after Kellen Moore. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and the last couple of years of Mike McCarthy as the play caller in Green Bay were not pretty at all. And I know Aaron Rodgers was very disgruntled with the direction of the offense at the time. Boy, but at the same time, I mean, I think Dak from 2019 to 2021, averaged more than 300 passing yards a game. And, now I feel his price is almost a little lower than it should be in a way. So not inconceivable that he could fall out of the top 15, especially if the running game is completely gone. And he was never a prolific runner, but he did add a little bit of value with his legs earlier in his career. If that's gone and he just has to do it purely with his passing numbers, and that's the only way to produce fantasy points, yeah, he could fall out of the top 15. But I don't know. If I was betting on it, I think he's still going to be within or close to quarterback one range. I still think Dak is fundamentally a good quarterback. And, it's a pretty solid offense around him. So I'm hoping McCarthy and Schottenheimer just don't screw things up.
Yeah, it feels like just let the guys play, and there's enough talent there that he should be good. I think for me, I really like Dak, and I think that he is a value. But I think you need to understand what you're getting in Dak. If you're expecting a guy that's going to put up, top 5 weeks at the position, I think you're probably going to be disappointed. If he's a guy that you're looking as your QB1, say in a Superflex league, you're probably going to be disappointed. But I think he's going to be a guy that's going to put up probably 10 plus, like top 12 weeks. And he's going to be that fringe QB1 week in, week out. So if he's your QB2, you're in a really good position, but you're never quite happy with him as your QB1. I personally don't think they're going to become more run orientated. I think that, that maybe they've added some pieces in terms of Ronald Jones and things, but I think this offense is going to be more, hopefully, pass happy. And I think that using someone like Tony Pollard more is going to bring in Dak, because it's not going to be right, let's pound Tony Pollard between the tackles 15 times a game. It's going to be, let's go Tony Pollard out in space, and that brings Dak in because it's checkdowns and screen game and stuff like that. And I also think the loss of potentially Zeke around the goal line is where Dak could see, you said he's never been a massively prolific rusher, but actually earlier in his career, he was still knocking in not massive touchdown numbers, but 5-6 rushing touchdowns a year, which is really useful little production. And if Tony Pollard is a smaller back, they don't feel comfortable around the goal line with him, maybe we start to see Dak get back to his earlier days of his career where he was used around the goal line and was pretty effective when he did so. So, yeah, I like Dak. I'd be shocked if he fell outside the top 15. I think he's a back-end QB1, as I said. But, yeah, I guess I'm probably a little bit more bullish than consensus and the average on Dak, should we say.
Yeah, good point about them probably not being equipped to be extremely run heavy now with Ezekiel Elliott gone. And,
I do think they probably add someone where, we've got there's a lot of those veteran backs that are floating out that I think, they're going to start picking up jobs once they don't have to, basically be there for the first 2 weeks of camp, isn't it? That's the point. They'll start getting signed. So whether it's Leonard Fournette or Dalvin Cook or, maybe they bring Zeke back. But I think there'll be a player added to that backfield through the summer.
Quite likely, yes.
So question from James in the chat as well. Do you have any advice for convincing friends who have exclusively played redraft in the past to join Dynasty Startup?
Oh, man. Yeah, just have them talk to people who are avid Dynasty players, and hopefully you can do it. But yeah, I know during COVID, I convinced a group of friends who I had always played redraft with. And that was the great thing, because everyone was kind of at home doing nothing. And it wasn't hard to convince these people to take part in this, online slow draft. Dynasty ran the idea by them. Everyone was excited about it. And now I've, converted like 10 people who had never played Dynasty before. And they are like, it's their favorite league now. So that's it, basically. Just the involvement you have with your team. Explain to them that you will become very attached to your team, more so than you do in redraft leagues. And, it is your baby to nurture and care for and go through all sorts of ups and downs with. And just have them talk to people who've played in Dynasty formats. Because once you go Dynasty, you'll still play in redraft leagues, but you'll never not be in a Dynasty league ever again. Probably.
I've honestly never heard anybody who's tried Dynasty and said, I don't like it. I'm just going to stick to redraft. It just because what's there not to like? It's all the fun of redraft, but you get to keep your players year on year. So yeah, I think just convince them to try it, and then say, if you don't like it after a year or two, we'll get rid of the league. But 9 times out of 10, once people are hooked, they stay. Yeah,
and so many people like playing in keeper leagues because they like that idea of some element of player retention and being able to keep a player who you like because he performed well for you and outperformed his draft spot the previous year. And Dynasty is like all that. You don't just have to limit it to 1 or 2 or 3 players. You can keep everyone. And, that's the beautiful thing about it, that you keep these guys in perpetuity unless you want to get rid of them.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Just had a new member join, Marcus. Welcome. Thanks for joining. If you're in the chat, guys, make sure you jump in, give us your questions. This is your opportunity to get Pat to answer your questions. We're going to dive back across to the pre-planned questions from Danny, one of our other YouTube members. How do you approach / balance your bench in a Dynasty roster?
Interesting question. I think positional balance is vastly overrated in fantasy football. So I'm not necessarily looking to strike a certain balance between positions on my bench, especially if it is, at least 28, 30 roster spots. And mainly the reason I think it's so overrated is because we have the power to make trades. And that's one of the funnest things about playing fantasy football, is that you can make trades. And certainly in Dynasty, we make a lot of trades. So I don't mind getting out of balance with my positions, knowing, I can eventually reorder things via the trade market. But otherwise, it sort of depends on what mode I'm in. Like if I'm chasing a title, my bench is probably going to be heavy on veterans. And if I'm in build or rebuild mode, then it's probably going to be heavier on young guys who haven't popped yet. And I'm optimistic eventually will pop.
Okay. Are there any particular positions where let's take that one at a time. So if you're competing, should we say, are there any particular positions that you're more likely to lean towards rostering on your bench?
I mean, if I'm competing, I definitely in Superflex want to make sure I have like a third quarterback and maybe even something, like a quarterback handcuff to a couple of my guys, just so I'm never going to be caught totally with my pants down at the quarterback position for sure. So, and I think really if I'm contending or rebuilding, I always do like to throw a lot of darts at running back. And since I tend not to spend up as much in Dynasty startups, like it takes a few draft cycles for me usually to get the running backs to where I want them. But I always like to throw a lot of darts because so many guys just come out of the fog at that position and wind up being impactful, because it's more about opportunity sometimes at running back than it is about talent. And, the injury rates at the position are pretty high. So a lot of guys wind up getting unexpected opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I always preach leaning towards what I call the volume-based positions, so quarterback and running back, just because of that. As you said, if there's an injury to a quarterback, suddenly your backup's a starter. If there's an injury to a running back, suddenly the backup is, at least flex-worthy. And wherever you're at in the cycle, whether you're competing or rebuilding, that player, if you're not looking to win and you don't want to put him in your roster, that's suddenly trade bait, and you can hopefully get, whether it's a pick or, a younger asset that you can spin that player off for a profit. So yeah, I love the idea of attacking those more volume-based positions, shall we say.
Yes.
So another question from Tom here. What's the one FantasyPros tool that benefits Dynasty managers the most? And obviously, I know we talked earlier about the Draft Wizard and how that's useful for that startup. Is there any other tools that you think kind of when you're in the league, once you've post startup, should we say, that are particularly useful?
Yeah, once you're in it, hopefully it's our Dynasty trade value chart. And our developers have set up the Dynasty trade value chart so that it's powered by our Dynasty rankings. Myself and the other fantasy analysts at FantasyPros, Derek Brown, Andrew Erickson, Sam Hoppen, our newest addition. So, those rankings drive the Dynasty trade value chart. So, hopefully not everyone is going to agree with every value we have placed or the way we have certain players ranked on the chart. But it is fueled by 4 different people. And so, the one person being irrationally high or low on a certain player isn't going to totally skew the values. But, and we're constantly like tweaking that and making sure that we think the values are matching what we're seeing in all the Dynasty leagues we play in. And between the 4 of us, we're in dozens upon dozens of dynasty leagues. So, yeah, we work pretty hard on that, and I think it's a really helpful in-season tool. But yeah, if you're doing the dynasty startup, then check out the Draft Wizard for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And reminder, guys, if you're in the chat, make sure you're dropping your questions in. We've got a live mailbag. We've got Pat here. Get those questions in so we can pick his brains a little bit. So the next one, this was from Stefan Lacko. He sent this in on Twitter earlier. So this is specifically for Superflex draft. So we see it time and time again. Those first sort of 7-8 quarterbacks fly off the board. If you're sitting there, 110, 111, 112, you're starting feeling left out. So how do you approach Superflex drafts when you get that late draft spot?
Yeah, this is a great question by Stefan, because this is really a vexing dilemma. The 112 spot, or even if, I'm in a 14-team dynasty league and getting, the 13th or 14th pick. So I think everyone would pretty much unanimously agree that there are 8 quarterbacks who should probably comprise the first 8 to 10 picks of a dynasty draft. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence in some order. But what do you do when all those guys are gone and you're sitting there at 111 or 112? If one of those guys falls to you because someone ahead of you takes Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, obviously you have to pounce on the opportunity. And, if you do get one of those 8, lucky enough to get one of those 8 when you're sitting at the bottom of the first round, then I'd probably pass on a quarterback with my second pick. But let's say you are picking 112, those 8 are off the board. I tend to think you should take one of Anthony Richardson or Deshaun Watson, or maybe Dak Prescott on the turn. Take one of those guys, but don't double up on quarterback, because you're just not getting great value at that point. But I do like to get a foothold. Some people might be stubborn and punt the position altogether and wait on it till later and cobble it together with the Derek Carrs and Jared Goffs later on. A viable strategy, but I would definitely want to get a foot in the door there with either Richardson or Watson, ideally.
Yeah. So is there ever a scenario, I guess, in a Superflex league where you're leaving the top 2 rounds without a quarterback?
As of now, I don't think I would. I mean, maybe if those 8 went in the first 10 picks and Anthony Richardson went 111, then maybe I'd think about whether I wanted to indeed grab Deshaun Watson there, or maybe just pass and get my quarterback of the future in some future draft. Knowing the 2024 draft is looking like it might potentially be a good quarterback draft, but who knows? Sometimes I think we kind of thought this about this year's draft class, and maybe it wasn't as deep at quarterback as we thought it was going to be. So, as of now, I think I would probably take one no matter what, assuming one of the top 10 were there.
The only time I could see myself doing it is, one, if there's some obscene value, can I get Justin Jefferson at 112 and Jamar Chase at 201 or something like that? Or if I'm basically have already decided after the first 2 rounds that I'm going down productive struggle route, and do I grab, I think I can get Kyler in the 3rd round, or as you said, punt quarterback altogether and go, right, I'm building for 2024. I'm just going to draft young wide receivers or something like that. But yeah, it's hard to imagine a scenario in a Superflex league where you are basically accepting that you're just going to miss out at quarterback completely.
Yeah, I think you illustrated the one example, Rich, that would convince me to bypass quarterback. If Jefferson and Chase were both available on the turn, it would be pretty hard to resist the chance to get both of them to start your dynasty team.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen Jefferson go past about 109, 110 in any sort of startup this year. So, yeah, it's a pretty slim scenario, let's be honest.
Oh, yes.
Tom's dived in the chat saying, are you a fan of third round reversal for Dynasty startups?
Oh, interesting. I don't dislike it. I guess I've never seen it as necessary to make things more fair. Like to me, it seems like maybe a relic of the early 2000s in fantasy, and particularly redraft, when it was such an advantage to be picking at the top to get LaDainian Tomlinson or Priest Holmes or Sean Alexander, when these incredible workhorse running backs were scoring 25 touchdowns a year, Marshall Faulk, Edgerrin James. So like, I don't know if you necessarily need it anymore to balance the scale. So I would say, like, if I had my druthers, I would not want it in my drafts, but I don't hate it either. Like, I'm not appalled that the Scott Fishbowl has it, for instance.
I like third round reversal. I would much prefer fifth round reversal. So I've looked at it a couple of times this offseason using my trade values and things like that. And third round reversal skews values too far towards the back end. Fifth round reversal, for my values, is almost perfect. And it's been that way for the last, I've got values going back 2.5 years, and I've sort of looked at it and it seems like it's perfect. The problem is I've not got yet to find any sites that offer fifth round reversal as a potential option. So yeah, you almost have to draft off a Google Doc or Excel spreadsheet or something and then input it, because it's not straightforward.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. It's almost an overcorrection, because in some drafts, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's helpful for those people who are sitting at 112 and can't get one of those top 8 quarterbacks. And maybe, you know, it's fair to balance things a little bit in a dynasty startup. But yeah, for the most part, I'm kind of ambivalent toward it, though.
Yeah. How do you feel about this? This is one of my bugbears, so I'm keen to pick your brain, Pat. How do you feel about a startup that does reverse order of startup for a rookie draft in post rookie draft? So if you get the 101 in the startup, you get the 112 in the rookie draft. If you get the 101 in the 112 in the startup, you get the 101 in the rookie draft.
Interesting. So this is assuming in the startup rookies are not included in the pool.
Yeah,
and you're doing your rookie draft separately.
So it's essentially doing the startup as 2 separate drafts rather than one complete one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't love it. I mean, I'd much rather pick early in the rookie draft, I think, than in the startup. I mean, I feel like I could do more with the 112 pick and the top rookie pick than the opposite, when you pick 101 and maybe you're not sure about which of the big quarterbacks you want to take, and you don't love what's there at 212 for you, and then you're also picking the last in the rookie draft. That's not a great spot to be in.
No, I absolutely hate it. As I said, it's one of my bugbears. I can't stand it when I hear people, listeners or people say, "Oh, this is what I've got. Where should I try and pick?" It's like, that rookie 101 is so much more valuable. You just got to look at this year's startup ADP. Bijan Robinson's a first round pick, so you're basically getting 3 top 15 players if you're picking at the back end of the first, compared to 1 top 15 player if you're getting that startup 101, but then you're getting that rookie 112. So yeah, it skews values way too much for me to be a fan of.
Yeah, that's interesting. Luckily, I've never done a draft like that, and I think I've only heard it referred to one other time. So I haven't found it to be that common, but there's probably a good reason for that.
It seemed to be the hot thing last off season. I feel like I ranted about it a few times, and hopefully have had some impact in pushing people away from it. But yeah, I seem to be. It was like once every other day I was being asked about it, and I was like,
"Oh wow, yeah,
it just needs to be stamped out because it's awful practice."
Yes, that is an idea that needs to be thwarted, no question.
So another question from one of our members, Ryan. Thoughts on DJ Moore this season? Hold or sell? If selling, what are you looking for back?
Oh man, I'm holding, and I In fact, I drafted him in the Scott Fish Bowl about an hour before this show began. And I think maybe the 8th round, which I thought was pretty good value for him. Like I still love the player, and a guy who, boy, has compiled 3 1,100-yard seasons before age 26, and has done it with an assortment of mediocre quarterbacks. And really the only mediocre quarterback who could completely destroy his productivity was Baker Mayfield. Interestingly enough, I mean, like Sam Darnold comes back and immediately DJ Moore's productive again.
Yeah.
So, and like I'm optimistic about Justin Fields' development as a passer. And I know that is not unanimous enthusiasm about his passing production, but like, I'm here in the Midwest in the United States. I'm in Big Ten country and watched a lot of Ohio State, too often beating my Wisconsin Badgers by very lopsided scores. But I mean, Fields was terrific in college. I remember a lot of arching rainbows to Chris Olave that he, threw right on the money. And I know it wasn't pretty last year for him as a passer. I mean, he only topped 200 passing yards twice, but his group of pass catchers was terrible last year after Darnell Mooney got hurt, just terrible. And I don't think the Bears offense necessarily looked like what it will look like in the future, because I don't think the offensive line was where they wanted it to be. And I don't think they were even really interested in trying to build a pocket around Justin Fields, because it probably would have put his health in jeopardy last year. So they let him run really aggressively. I don't think it's going to be that way forevermore with Justin Fields, though. I don't think they're going to be quite as run heavy as they were last year. Probably more run heavy than average, but I just I don't think it's a bad situation necessarily for DJ Moore. I think he's immediately going to be the number one receiver. And, I'm betting the over on 1,000 yards if he stays healthy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about the Bears offense last year, but I don't think there can be enough said about just how run heavy they were. It's absolutely wild. Like if they'd have added 10 pass attempts per game, they'd have still been below average in terms of number of pass attempts per game in the league, which just shows how far behind average they were. I think that's going to regress to the mean slightly, and we're going to see more pass attempts. I think that DJ Moore's, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I don't think you can sell him right now for anything more than probably a late first. And I don't think I'd want to let him go for that sort of price. So I guess he's probably a hold for me. I was just having a look whilst you were talking, because I was like, I wonder where I am versus consensus. So I've just pulled up. So Dynasty Pros ADP, Dynasty ADP, I've got him at wide receiver 24, which I'll be honest, felt a little high for me. I've got him at 31 currently, and thought I'd be about consensus. So yeah, I guess I'm a little bit lower than I probably thought I was going to be quite frank.
Yeah, let's see where I have him right now. Oh, I've got him at 17. So yeah, I'm definitely bullish. And if a late first is the price, I don't think I want to give him up, even though next year's draft is looking pretty scrumptious. But it's funny you mentioned the run heaviness thing, and I maybe think back to 2021 and the Eagles, where there was a stretch of games, like I think it was over the second half of the season, where they were running on like 64% or 65% of their offensive snaps. It was like, a college team. It was just, they were so ridiculously run heavy, but then, they trade for AJ Brown, and, we've seen the Bears trade for DJ Moore. So like, maybe it was just, they didn't feel quite comfortable loosening the reins on Jalen Hurts. And maybe it's the same sort of thing with Justin Fields, and they'll feel a little bit better about letting him throw more this year now that he's got, ample pass catching talent, some upgraded personnel on the offensive line. Like, hopefully, again, I mean, I do think they will be run heavy, but hopefully not as extremely run heavy as they were last year.
Yeah, I think you can look at the offense and you can really maybe I'm trying to hype it up a bit too much, but I think this has got pretty much capable starters across the board. Yeah, it's not superstars, but DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney, they're all very different receivers. That's a decent three-piece. You look at the offensive line, Braxton Jones was really good last year. Hopefully Tevin Jenkins can take another step forward. They've obviously spent the first-round pick on Darnell Wright. You got Cole Kmet at tight end. They've added Robert Tonyan as well, who I think will be a nice complement to Cole Kmet. You've got a plethora of running back options, whether it's Khalil Herbert, Donta Foreman, Rashawn Johnson. Like there's pieces in this offense that I think it could take a step forward as long as Justin Fields keeps improving. Obviously, it sounds like you're a lot more bullish on that than I am. I like DJ Moore. I guess I'm probably just a little bit cautious about where he is in his age profile as well. We're approaching that point at which the value will potentially start to decline as we're creeping up in age.
Yeah, and the usage is going to be pretty critical too, because I think DJ Moore is so special after the catch. I really hope they're putting him in positions where he can get the ball with room to run after the catch, and hopefully. If that requires a lot of timing routes and everything, hopefully Justin Fields is up to that and doesn't need to be a see it, throw it type of quarterback. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how things develop with that team and that offense in training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating one to watch. Next question comes across from Brad Hutchinson. So how many taxi squad spots would you recommend for a startup?
Oh man, I personally would recommend 0. Like I would rather not have taxi squads. Honestly, okay. I'd rather just have like a 32-man roster.
Okay, so you don't see any benefit to them, I guess, at all.
Personally, no. I know I'm in the minority there, and most people like them, but I'd rather just expand the roster if you want to do that. And I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I've probably never really given it the thought that it deserves. Yeah, I think you've made a really good point there. What's the point in having a 30-man startup with 4 taxi squad spots? Right. Why not just have a 34-man startup? So yeah, you've convinced me. Yeah, probably the easiest thing you've ever convinced anyone.
Yeah, just kind of an Occam's razor thing there. Like why do you have to give these 4 guys that designation? Just make the rosters bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, I'm similar with IR spots the complete opposite really in IR spots, in that it drives me mad if leagues that have got 2 IR spots or things. I'm like, just unlimited IR. If I only have it for guys that are actually injured, but I don't think that you should be punished if you suddenly pick up a huge amount of injuries and having to drop valuable players just to fill the starting lineup. So yeah, I'm always, let's have as many IR spots as possible, but not have it so that if they're just slightly doubtful or questionable, they can go on IR. They need to actually be injured to be able to jump onto IR.
Right. Probably out of fear of people gaming the system, but if you put safeguards in place that prevent them from doing that, then you should be okay.
Yeah, exactly that. I think for me, it's the way to be. But as you said, there's always someone that'll try and find any sort of loophole they can get to get a bit of an advantage or game the system slightly. So the next question, Pat, comes across from Alex. Who do you see as the best wide receiver from the Giants? I have Hodgins, but he's on my roster bubble.
Boy, that's a great question. This year, I kind of think it is Hodgins. I'm partial to him, and part of it is because he's sort of unique to that wide receiving core in that he's like, it's a group of Lilliputians. They're all small and fast, and Hodgins is this big dude who maybe that gives him some additional red zone desirability as a target for Daniel Jones. And he did have that stretch last year where he scored 4 touchdowns in 5 games or something. So he was actually really impressive last year. So I'm partial to him for 2023. Boy, I mean, I guess for the long haul in Dynasty, I suppose I would probably have to bet on Jalen Hyatt, even though I'm not totally sold on him, just because of the system he comes from with Tennessee, where they run this like overly simplified system. Like Josh Heupel is this, the Tennessee head coach. He's an amazing play caller, but not necessarily amazing in getting his guys prepared for the NFL, because it's limited route trees and, a lot of times just trying to run by people. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Hyatt adjusts. I mean, he might just be a one-trick pony, but boy, it's quite a trick because that dude can fly.
Yeah, I think it's weird. Jalen Hyatt, if he was on probably 31 other teams, I'd probably be a lot higher on him. Because for me, I really like him as a speed slot. And I think that in terms of coming out this year, he's one of the best ball trackers I've seen probably the last 3 or 4 years. Like, yes, he can fly, but he's also phenomenal at tracking the deep ball.
Yes.
But I don't think he can play outside, because I think that as soon as the corner gets his hands on him, he's done. So I think he profiles best as that slot. But then he's on the Giants, who, as you said, they've got 10 slot receivers at the moment. It feels like it's absolutely
Paris
mad.
Campbell, Sterling Shepard. I know, it's just they've
Jamison Crowder, Jeff Smith.
Yes.
Like it's absolutely wild. So yeah, I think the best receiver for Dynasty would probably be Jalen Hyatt. The one I'm maybe slightly intrigued by this year is Darius Slayton, just because it's a case of he's the one guy that's not like the others, in that we've got a room full of small, undersized slot receivers. This is the one big guy that plays outside that is probably going to be on the field more than anybody else. The true answer for me is probably don't really roster any of them. Probably look at another team and move on, quite frankly.
Yeah, Slayton is really interesting because he always, like, there are short bursts where you watch him and you think, wow, this guy could really be special. But he's never been able to sustain any sort of momentum. And
he's the epitome. He's the epitome of a roster clogger, isn't he?
Yes,
because
he
shows just enough that you can't drop him.
You never want to release him.
Exactly. He's never good enough that you can start him. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't recommend people going and picking up Slayton.
Yeah,
because he's pretty useful.
I know Wan'Dale Robinson has fans too, but I think there has been one wide receiver in the Super Bowl era under 5'9" who's ever had 1,000-yard season. And it's some guy for the Lions from like 1989 whose name I can't even remember.
It's it's the Wan'Dale Robinson. It's funny because I throw him in the similar bucket to Kadarius Toney of literally any range of outcomes is possible for those guys, because when they're on the field, they've shown an incredible ability to command targets. And I'm a big believer that targets are earned, not just given. And, the target shares that they've both had when they've been on the field have been wild. But the problem is that we're seeing low value touches. Neither of them have got that getting pushed downfield. Neither of them are getting work in and around the red zone. So I'm relying on volume, but neither of them are staying healthy enough to be on the field to command that volume. So it's like, what are they going to be? Are they just going to end up these guys that flash and look great when they're on the field, but it's probably 2-3 games a year? Yeah.
I mean, I'm optimistic about Toney, just because I think like if he can stay healthy, things are going to be good. And just the fact that he's drawn a
ceiling's high,
he's drawn a target on 17.3% of his regular season snaps that he's taken in his 2 years in the NFL. And just to put things into perspective, Justin Jefferson, the target leader last year, drew a target on 17.1% of his snaps. And so, I know it's a smaller sample size than we want from Toney because of all the injuries, but man, take that sort of ability to earn targets and his crazy athleticism and blend that with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid calling the plays. And even if he's not a true full-time receiver, even if he's just playing 60% of the snaps, I still want that and would want to start that every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's probably top 5 in terms of wide receivers with the ball in their hands, in terms of ability to make guys miss and get yards after the catch. So yeah, it's certainly exciting. Yeah, Alex says thank you very much for the answer. So another question, trade for you, Pat. So I get Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. I trade away Zach Charbonnet, Mooney, DeAndre Swift, and a 2024 second-round pick. What are your thoughts?
If Shizuto has designs on a championship in 2023, I would absolutely sign off on that. I mean, like,
she's already got Jefferson, Cooper, Kirk. I presume that's Christian Kirk rather than Cousins, Cam Akers, Damian. I guess that's Damian Harris or maybe Damian Pierce, Sanders, Kelsey, Waller.
So pretty good team. Yeah, and I think this would sort of fortify championship credentials. So, Mooney, I think, has limited upside. Swift, we've already seen the Lions give him a thumbs down after seeing him for 3 years, and he's going to a team that doesn't throw to their running backs. In a 2024 second, even if it's a good rookie draft, I mean, it's a second. So, Charbonnet now goes to a place where he's going to be tethered to Kenneth Walker for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. So, I mean, it's not like he'd be giving away, totally worthless group of assets there. Like, there is some potential value in Charbonnet, Swift, Mooney, even that pick. But, to get Adams and Jones and the promise of immediate production for a championship run, I think you have to take that.
Yeah, I think I'd say sort of for me, Swift and Mooney equal Aaron Jones. Zach Charbonnet in the second round pick equal Devontae Adams. I think is a pretty even trade. Do I want 4 quarters? Do I want $1? It's an equal trade, but I'd always rather the $1 over 4 quarters in my pocket, quite frankly. So yeah, I'd lean Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. And as you said, I think if it helps solidify that championship roster, I think it kind of gets you going and gets you to that pot, doesn't it? Certainly. Well, the final question, Pat, before we get you out. So that UK Gator guy, he says, who are you drafting as a backup quarterback in Superflex? Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett, or Sam Howell? So I guess this is your QB3 rather than your QB2.
So I think it's Pickett for me, number one. And it's interesting. We were just debating Ridder versus Howell on the FantasyPros Dynasty podcast, and we kind of had a split decision on that one. And even for me, I've got them separated by 1 spot. But I've got it Pickett, Howell, Ridder. And I do feel like Pickett has somewhat limited of a ceiling. I mean, really interesting. Like, I didn't like the college profile at all. Like, he wouldn't have been drafted if he came out after 4 college seasons, but then he got a 5th COVID season, absolutely lit things on fire in his final year and wound up being a first-round pick.
And Jordan Madison helped that as well, let's be honest.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So I think he's probably going to be maxed out as like an average or slightly below average NFL starter, but I do think he's going to be able to keep the Pittsburgh job for probably 2 or 3 years. And Howell is sort of interesting. I mean, really good as a freshman at North Carolina in a major conference. Slid a little bit in his 3rd and final college season, but he had just lost Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, De'Ami Brown, and Daz Newsome, basically all his skill position talent. And Howell's got a good arm and he can run. So, the fact that he fell into the 5th round suggests that his chances of NFL success probably aren't that great, but definitely interesting tools. And I kind of liked his draft profile. I'm surprised he fell that far. Yeah, just to me, though, there isn't much separating Howell and Ridder. I mean, I did like Howell more as a prospect, but then he went in the 5th and Ridder went in the 3rd. And Ridder can certainly run. He's got 4.5 speed, and he's going to be in this offense where probably his running will be encouraged by Arthur Smith, who likes to keep it on the ground as much as possible. So, an interesting group together. I do prefer Pickett, and I have to ask real fast, Rich, since you're in the UK, is it weird to you and other UK fantasy football enthusiasts that so much of football, the gold standard for measurements of speed is in yardage? Is that hard for you guys to process, or have you gotten used to it and just know that 4.4 is fast and 4.7 is slow? And
I think Probably not, just because it comes with the verbiage, and it's, yards is what American football is measured in. I think the UK is probably the one place in the world that just mixes the imperial and metric system perfectly intertwined. You go to Europe, and if you start talking imperial, people don't have a clue what you're talking about. And if you go to America and you start trying to talk metric, people don't have a clue. But we just quite happily use both. So, yeah, I think the idea that a 40-yard dash is the measurement of speed rather than, why not 50, why not 30? And I think I read somewhere it was that the idea was that 40 yards was the furthest distance you'd sprint on a field as a gunner on a punt, which is why they use 40 yards, which, it's okay, fine. But yeah, I've never quite got my head around why it's 40 yards, but the fact it's yards, it's just football. It is what it is as such.
Yeah, I suppose everything in football is yards, but when you grow up with the metric system, that's got to be a little bit jolting to get into the sport that uses everything in yardage.
Yeah, although to be fair, like our football pitches, soccer pitches, they're measured in width and length are in yards. A football box, is a 12-yard box for 12 yard to the penalty box spot, 6-yard box. So that's measured in yards. So it just shows how stupid we are that we quite happily use both metrics. But back to the question for me, I think Kenny Pickett, in terms of value, is probably one, if not two tiers above Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell. I think who I'd rather as my backup, I'd always rather Kenny Pickett because I think his value's highest, and I'm always going to build a team around value. But I think it's an interesting question because it probably depends who my QB2 is. If I've got two absolute superstars and I just want a solid, reliable QB3 that's going to fill in on bye weeks and probably never hit my starting lineup other than that, then yeah, I'd probably go Pickett. If I'm maybe a fringe contender that's got, I don't know, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson at quarterback that could do with some juice, that could do with a, swing for the fences, let's try and find a potential superstar, then yeah, that's where I'd probably lean Ridder or Howell as that QB3, just because I'd feel like I'm probably at a disadvantage over the other true contenders in my league at quarterback. So let's take the home run play of if Ridder or Howell really hit it off because of that rushing upside, they've got a much higher ceiling than someone like a Pickett as such. Perfect. Well, thank you ever so much for jumping on, Pat. It has been an absolute delight. And yeah, I know the people listening and watching have really appreciated you answering their questions. Remind everybody while they're here, where can they find you? Where can they find your ranks? Where can they find your work?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for having me, Rich. This was a lot of fun, and there were a lot of great questions. So it was fun to take part in this. And people can find me on Twitter at Fitz_FF. And, just be sure to visit FantasyPros.com. I mean, hopefully we're, a candy store for everyone with our tools and content. And, we have not just there are a lot of people who contribute to that, including our own Tom Strachan, who does amazing work for us, especially on the Dynasty front. So, there are a lot of great contributors and something for everyone on the site. So please check us out.
No, actually, it's an incredible tool. It's something I've been using. I probably don't want to admit how long I've been using it in terms of basically since I started in fantasy, the volume of content, the amazing tools. It is a must for anyone playing fantasy. But yeah, thank you ever so much. We're going to be diving in over the coming weeks. We've got some redraft content coming. I'm going to be going into a dynasty theory segment. We're going to be looking at, the thought process behind trading, the thought process behind startups, and try and get some more theory-based stuff coming to your ears. But yeah, we will see you again very soon.